All right, welcome to this week's podcast of Behind the Sermon and More. I'm excited for today for a couple of reasons. Number one, we have a guest with us who is a good friend and also a staff member here, Jared Wiedenroth. We'll get to know more about him in just a second. But secondly, we're going to talk about the very first installment of our new sermon series from the book of Genesis, looking at the life of Joseph, Genesis 37 through 50. The first sermon in chapter 37. We're going to discuss that in just a few moments. But before we do, I want to introduce you to our guest. Jared serves as our kids pastor and does an incredible job in that area. Really grateful for him and how God has used him and how God is currently using him and how God is going to continue to use him. So Jared, thank you for being here, man. Tell us a little bit about your family. I know you got a whole tribe, so tell us about your family.
Yeah, the tribe. We've been hustling and bustling. We have 4 kids, my wife and I. Her name is Lauren. We have 4 kids, ages 12, 10, 8, and 6. So 2 girls at the top, 2 boys at the bottom. They're all different. They're all awesome. Very busy life. But yeah, we get to homeschool them, which is a blessing. Actually, my wife homeschools them. So
that's why it's a blessing.
On my day off, I just mess things up. So, but she does a great job. Very grateful for her. She gets a lot of credit there. But yeah, we've been married this month will be 15 years.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's great, dude. So are you the PE coordinator on your day off?
Yeah, I call myself the superintendent, but I just come in, make sure everything's running smooth, and PE, we do go outside. So yeah,
nice.
Official dog walker.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah. I totally get that. Oh yeah, that's another thing about you. Tell us about your animals, bro.
Oh man,
you got a pile of them.
7 chickens that don't lay eggs. Ask me how that happens. We have a dog now. Her name is Piper. She is an awesome little puppy, and we have a bunny. And that bunny just sits out on the porch.
But you love her. She
does get
too?
attention. I guess I love her.
Yeah. Awesome.
One of those.
Well, I haven't met Piper yet. Her Piper is super cute, and I think my kids are kind of the reason that you guys have Piper, because we got a dog just before you, and her name is Pookie, and Pookie's awesome, right? She's this really cool dog, and your kids fell in love with Pookie, and so we convinced Lauren to convince you. But you guys need one too, right?
Even me being an asthmatic, someone with severe allergies, looking at my kids with puppy eyes, looking back at me,
it does something.
It was rough, man.
Yeah, I never wanted a dog. I mean, we had a couple of dogs when we first got married, and we had a beagle, we had Jack Russell, and I actually love dogs, but man, raising kids is so hard. I'm like, I don't want to add another thing, and so I never really wanted a dog. Dana is actually allergic as well to dogs. But yeah, same thing, man. Our kids are like, man, this is going to be so good for us. And we bit the bullet.
Yeah.
So now we're like, I don't know how long they live, but we're in a pretty big commitment now.
Yeah. Huge. Beyond our kids being in our house. I think that's the commitment that we're in.
Oh yeah. Oh
yeah.
Wow.
So,
that's true. That's true. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me of that. That's good.
Your eyes just lit up.
A couple of really important questions before we dive into the sermon. Number one, do you have a favorite movie?
Man, I have probably... Yes, I would say I have 3 favorite movies.
Okay.
So I would go with the Batman trilogy. So Christian Bale as Batman.
Nerd alert.
Come on. Batman's my dude right there. So
that's cool.
But all-time favorite movie, I'd go with Home Alone. I know that may be a little risque with some language and stuff. Maybe guard your kids, but man, I can quote Home Alone in any situation in life.
That's awesome, man. So Home Alone, I mean, it's Christmas season almost too. Yep. So I'm sure it'll be in so many homes, right? Because the TV plays that, and they play Elf, and they play what's up you'll shoot your eye out kid movie,
Christmas Story.
Yeah. Those will play like over and over again. Great movie. So there's a couple in our life group. Their dog is named Kevin after.
Wow.
Is that the dog in Home Alone?
No, that's the son.
Oh, the son is Kevin off Home Alone. Okay.
Yeah.
So they named their dog after it's a Home Alone.
That's
name.
awesome.
Anyhow,
that's awesome.
That's good, man.
I respect them.
Yeah. What about food?
Food, man. I could just eat steak. I love some steak, man. Some ribs, like meat in general.
Are you carnivore guy?
I might. Yeah. I love meat. I mean,
like on the diet. Are you a
meat.
Carnivore diet guy?
No. I'm just whatever tastes good like that. Yeah.
Same, dude. I'm with you on that. All right. So I've asked a few guests if they prefer coffee or tea, but I already know yours is coffee, right?
You know it.
All right. So here's the question then. What's your favorite kind of coffee? I know you're like a coffee snob. So what's your favorite kind of coffee?
Yeah, I've become pretty bougie with that. So I would just go with like a good espresso. Right now I'm drinking an Americano.
Okay.
So do you know what that is?
I had no idea. No idea.
I would not recommend it for you because I know what coffee can do for you. But it's just espresso full with a little bit of water to water it down.
Okay.
So black.
Yeah. So it'll jazz you up a little bit.
It jazzes you up.
Yeah, so Jared made me coffee once here. We're currently in the office here at Apex Baptist, and Jared made me coffee once, and I was like, yeah, dude, this is gonna be great. I really would like some coffee. I drank it, and I promise you, maybe 10 minutes later, I don't know, I can't even remember the time, my heart just started thumping, man. So I walked, no joke. I think it was 3.5 miles. I did a 3.5 mile loop just to calm down.
Yep.
And I was like, never again can Jared make me coffee. It tasted great, but it was pretty potent. All right, awesome. So, favorite coffee is, what did you say? Not Americano?
Yeah, just something with something with espresso.
Something with espresso.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know what that means, but somebody does. Okay, I know where you're from, and I think I know the answer to this. But what's your favorite sports team?
Oh man, I've got all of the Boston sphere in me. I'm born and raised in the Boston area, so probably a diehard Red Sox fan, diehard Patriots fan.
Nice.
Yeah, so Red Sox. Going through all the years of disappointment. And I mean, you see 86 years of failure.
Yeah.
And just then you see a World Series in 2020 or 2004.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
And it's big, man.
Yeah.
I thought that was big.
We got to keep Pastor Jared and Pastor Kevin out of the same room when we're talking baseball, because he's a big Yankees fan, right?
And a Giants fan.
Oh, and Giants.
For football.
So both of those are just
we don't.
You guys don't mix.
And he's huge, so I'm not going to mess with him.
That's awesome. Well, Jared, thank you, man. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to be on here as we discuss the very first installment of our Life of Joseph sermon series. What we're going to do today, a little bit different, is Jared listened intently to the message on Sunday, right, Jared?
I was in the room, actually. I was in the room.
It doesn't happen all the time. That's
Not
great,
all the time.
man. But Jared has a few questions just to roll out there, and it's not that I'm going to answer every one of these questions, but he does have a few questions to ask, and we're just going to answer some of those together, just based on the message. So, Jared, I'll let you start, bro.
Yeah. So we're talking Joseph, and we're talking his dad, showing some favoritism to him over his brothers, and how do we? I mean, I think this is in general, but as a father, as a parent, maybe even in a workplace environment, how do we guard against showing favoritism?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, first of all, we have to see scripturally what is said about favoritism. And one thing that jumps to mind is you look at the book of James, and there's a very clear picture there of, hey, what do you do with the wealthy person versus the person who's not so wealthy, and they come into the room? Like, how do you treat one versus the other? And I think what you see in that is the heart and the character of God, that he does not play favorites in terms of what you have or what you don't have, because here's what we know. The Lord is sovereign over all of that, and every person is loved and cared for in him. So I think understanding scripturally what the character and the value of God looks like helps us to know how to best treat those around us, whether it's parenting or whether it's someone in the workplace or, someone that you have interactions with when you go out to eat. The truth is there's opportunity all around us for us to choose favorites and for us to look down upon others. And I think we have to be very, very careful of that, because what we see in the heart of Christ, I would say, clearly we see Jesus going after the least of these, right? And it's not that, we love the least of these more. It's like, this group has been forgotten. Yeah. Like there's this whole, party over here that are elevated, and they're kind of adorned, and it's a road that's highly traveled because it's easy and people gravitate towards that. But what about this less adorned path? Yeah. What about this area over here where there's a group of forgottens? And some of that is by way of social status. Some of that is by way of like, this is what my past looks like. Some of that is purely economic, right? So the list can go on and on, but Jesus goes after them, and he helps them to see that they're valued and cared for and loved. And so for us, I think we reflect the heart of God whenever we choose to not have those favorites. It's tough.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned Sunday, and this is in terms of parenting, how our kids go through phases of life. And the reality of those phases, and we just have to be very honest about that, is you will have a child, or maybe if you have multiple children, a couple of your kids who are kind of in a better season in terms of the way that they behavior, the way that they respond, the way that they react, the decisions that they're making are like, oh, it's kind of easy to like you and to love you right now. And juxtapose that with the other children who are like polar opposite. And it's easy to say, man, I'm kind of gravitating towards really liking these kids because they're just doing what they're supposed to. I think that's just natural humanity type stuff. Where we have to be careful is when we allow that to become preferential, right? We're now treating them better. We're giving them greater praise. We are elevating them to the point that the others who are kind of in a phase of not so good are saying, dad loves, them more than he loves us. And it's based upon who they are. So that's just going to drive them elsewhere, right? I think we have to be really careful of these types of things.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you see it in your 3 ages are pretty spread down, right? With my 4, it's easy sometimes as a dad who has like a son who, the youngest of ours, who's probably the cutest of all of them right now, right?
Sure.
Because he's the youngest, but he's a really good athlete. And it's easy for me to be like gravitating towards that, someone who is an athlete too, to say like, man, I want to hang out with him. I want to go throw him the ball. But then I have 3 others that are still like desiring my time, desiring the attention. And I've got to guard that. I've got to guard them so that I'm not gravitating towards Lincoln so much, so I get that for sure.
Yeah, it's easy to do. And I think a key point, Jared, is to be proactive, because if we're only reactive, here's what happens when Lincoln does well, right? And baseball, it's like, oh, you're awesome. And then when like another kid maybe struggles, like, dude, what are you doing? Like, squish the bug. That's the baseball term for
it is.
Trying to have the proper hitting mechanics. It's easy for us to do that if we're reactive only. If we're proactive, what we're doing is we're sitting down with our family, and we're the primary disciple makers in our home.
Right.
So we're sitting down with our family and we're saying, hey, like, just proactively, I love you. I value you. I think you guys are awesome. One of our kids, we've been really working with her on not responding negatively to things when they don't, when things just don't go her way. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, this is life stuff, honey. Like things for the rest of your life, you're going to have things that don't go your way.
Yeah.
And how you respond to that is really important. So very proactively, I'm trying to sit down and say, hey, before it happens, because it's going to, you're going to have something that doesn't go your way. Before that happens, I want to help you to understand how to respond in a way that shows maturity and in a way that shows that, hey, it's okay. Like, yeah, I prefer this, but this didn't happen and it's okay. And so I think as parents, being really intentional to be proactive helps to temper some of the favoritism that can naturally rise to the surface when we're reactive only.
Yeah. And I think that kind of bleeds into the next question here. How do we avoid passivity and live with intentionality, specifically as parents? And I think you kind of hit on that with being intentional, being proactive, and going and establishing maybe some habits and rhythms in the family household so that you are approachable, that we do know that this time is set. So maybe you can elaborate on how to avoid passivity.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think we talked Sunday a little bit about a lack of intentionality and a lack of leadership in Jacob's life, who's Joseph's daddy, right? Because Jacob, man, God used him in incredible ways, but he had a lot of ups and downs. I mean, even so much that he was wrestling with the Lord. We see him deceiving Isaac, deceiving Esau. We see this polygamous lifestyle that caused a lot of problems within the home. And what we can see is, man, there was some passivity. There was some like pulling away, right? Because if you think about the kids that are in the home, think about the infighting, think about the reason we even talk about the issue of favoritism is because he favored Joseph.
Right.
I like Joseph more than the rest. He's smarter. He's more handsome. I had him when I was old, and I just really like him. He interprets dreams really well. I'm going to make him this coat. And he just created a lot of issues in the home. So again, there's probably a lot of reaction from Jacob in the way that he parented, and passivity in other areas where it's like, man, I should have been more proactive here with my other children. And I think a way for us to combat that is we have to recognize it. And I would say, like, it's easy for us, read through Genesis, kind of read some of the history. Mm-hmm. We can recognize it because it's on paper, right? Like, we can see that. But what if our life is written on paper? What are some things that are blind spots for us that we're just not seeing? I think you have to recognize when you're not leading out. You have to recognize when you're peeling back a little bit. And I think once you do recognize that, you have to be really honest about where you are. Yep. The only way for you to be intentional, the only way for you to lead the way that you need to lead is to be really honest about where you currently are. Mm-hmm. You know, you're not going to grow until you're honest about where you currently are. Yep. Anytime someone's trying to get in shape, you know, lose weight, whatever, it always starts with, okay, what's my weight right now? Yep. What are my measurements right now? Where am I today? And I want to say, oh, it only reads that way because I drank a lot of water, or I want to say, oh, it's because I had a big meal. But like, no, this is really where I am. Mm-hmm. And the only way for me to move forward is to recognize where I am and to be honest about that. So there's lots of other things that could be said here. Obviously, considering the word, trusting in the Lord, asking for the Lord to help. But I think that intentionality of like, okay, let's do some work and really assess.
Yeah, and I think the honesty has to come between not just yourself being honest with yourself about where you're at, but with those around you too. Yeah. Like, those hard discussions need to happen. Mm-hmm. I know, like, in my life, Lauren and I, we've had those reset type of discussions, saying like, hey, we're here. We don't want to be here. We want to like better our family. We want to better our marriage. So let's be honest with where we're at and keep moving forward in a positive direction and try to fix things and overcome it. So I think it's a crucial part in a marriage, a family, in friendships, however you look at it, that you say, okay, I'm going to be honest with myself. I'm going to be honest with the Lord, but I'm also going to be honest with those around me.
That's really good, man. And I think that also helps us to see, you know, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, but the second best time is now. It helps us to see, you know what, failure is not final. And if we read anything about Jacob, the life of Jacob, and if we read anything about the life of Joseph, we see that that's reality, man. God's not finished. And as long as we draw breath in our lungs, man, he can do a lot of things to turn us around. And we can't do anything about the 20 years ago, right? Yeah. What we didn't plant or what we did plant. But what we can do is we can do something about the right now. Yeah. So I think when it comes to not being passive, hey, maybe you have been crazy passive and you've not led your family well. I get it. Repent of that, turn from that, but also trust that, hey, man, God can do a new thing. And part of that is recognizing that this is where I am, and then trusting the Lord to move you forward from here.
Yeah, and it's not too late. Right. Like today, you're still here today,
you're
right?
Still here.
Start it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Cool. You mentioned like the 20 years ago thing, and I know we all have pasts. Yeah. And you mentioned some of your family history and thinking about like the break the cycle and the things that you may have to think that you are defined by because of your family's history or things of that nature. Like what are some steps that you've taken to just break that cycle? And maybe you want to elaborate to what your family history looks like, or people can go back to the sermon and hear that. But what are some things that you're intentional about? What are some things that you and your wife Dana are intentional about doing to say, not us?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a loaded question. So I'll give like a microcosm of it because I think it's layered. I think I could say a lot of things about this. I'll give you for example. One of the things that I've recently realized about myself that I've like carried with me from the way I was raised and just the dynamics that surrounded me is I've always felt like you've heard the word imposter syndrome, like I just don't belong, right? I've always felt like, man, this just isn't for me. First one in our family to go to college, and college just felt like it felt foreign to me. I didn't know what a college credit hour was. I didn't feel like I belonged there. I was only there because of baseball. And then as time ticked on, like God just began to open one door after the other that I would, you know, by his grace, like be allowed to step through. But every time I stepped through that door, I just felt like the odd one in the room. And so you've probably even heard this from me. I can be very self-deprecating because of that. And I think it comes from insecurity. It comes from feeling like I'm not good enough. There's a lot of my growing up that tethers me to that. That's not me casting blame on my parents or extended family or anything. I'm just simply saying some of the dynamics that we had around us has caused me to really feel that way about myself. And again, some of it's self-induced. But what I'm realizing now is in order for me to break that cycle, I have to stop being self-deprecating. Like I have to believe that, man, like I'm a child of God. God has equipped me. He's called me. He's gifted me to do the things that he's called me to do, not only as a pastor, but as a dad, as a husband. Like he's given me the tools that I need to lead my family well. I don't have to, every time I take a step forward, like force myself to go backwards because I feel like I don't belong there. I don't have to do that. Yeah. And I think I've done that a lot in my life. I can say, you know what, as far as the Lord wants to take me, like my hands are open and I'm ready to go. So I think in order to break the cycle, which is really the drive, I believe, of your question, is you have to admit the need that you have for the Lord to intervene and say, hey, help me to do this. Like, so self-deprecation is not helpful. Self-effacing is good. Having humility is good. Being someone who says, God, I need you. So recognize that you need him and you need him to help you to not fall into that trap or fall into that cycle. I mean, my family, extended family around me is like riddled with drug addiction, alcoholism. And so we've made some intentional decisions for us. Like we're never going to touch alcohol. It's never going to be a thing for our family. Like my wife and I, we have our own decisions from the past that have been troublesome. And we're like, man, we're just not going to introduce ourselves to those things as a married couple coming together, seeking to follow Jesus. Like we're not going to take that chance. And so we need God's grace to help us with some of the parameters and boundaries that we've set. Some of the freedoms that we can enjoy, we've decided not to partake in. It's like, Lord, just help us to not, even expose ourselves, or I would say this way, to entertain the idea of the cycle being kind of introduced to our family. We don't want it to be something that we could very easily fall into. And so I think in order to get different results, you have to do different things. And for me, again, that microcosm is like, okay, it starts with me realizing I can be really insecure, self-deprecating. Some of that has to do with how I grew up and that kind of thing. And so just recognize that that's how I can be and take a different path.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, dude. What about you?
Oh, man. That, like you said, it's a loaded question. I think there's a lot of the cycle. I come from a first generation Christian parents. My dad was in the military, and he was saved in the military and then came out of the military and became a pastor. Wow. And so there was a lot of things that we hear the word discipleship, and we are the disciple makers as parents a lot. I don't think they knew what that was. And I think they've been open with us as kids to say they didn't know what that was, and they didn't have the resources. And I think there's the excuses that I could say, like, oh, I'm only a second generation Christian, but I'm not. I know that God has gifted me to parent my kids, and like has given me these little hearts and souls to kind of like just pour into, and without his grace on my life to do that, then I am nothing. So I think my not allowing maybe my previous upbringing, like before my parents, a way that is not a disciple making family oriented type situation, to say like, man, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to be intentional about what my kids hear from Lauren and I, and we're going to be super intentional with discipleship and letting them know that Jesus is who he is and how he's saved us, and they're offered the same thing. So yeah. And then keep growing from there, right? Because it doesn't stop there.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Because that's one big thing I push with kids in kids ministry. It's like, you get saved, you get baptized. Like, it doesn't stop there. Like, we keep growing as Christians, as followers of Jesus. So
I love that.
Keep doing that. So I think that cycle of thinking through what does my family look like? How does discipleship look like in my family? It was never really like modeled for me. So trying to figure that out. Just nothing against my parents, but absolutely, they just didn't have that experience either. So
I've also learned, Jared, that in a lot of Christian families, that's the reality. Like, discipleship has not been modeled. And so one of the major points in this past Sunday's sermon was, with Jacob, it's really important that your walk matches your talk.
Yep.
And I think we've had a lot of Christian families that's been the reality. And of course, like us too, we could be so guilty of that, of like, hey, yeah, we're a family that honors God. We're a family that seeks to please him. But then you have these moments where like the walk is not matching the talk. Like we're not intentionally, and this goes back to the passivity question, but we're not intentionally discipling our families in the way that we ought to, right? And we allow ourselves to get into a place, I believe, where those cycles can easily like be true of us. We don't even know it. It's just a blind spot. And it's because of that lack of intentionality. We're saying the right things and articulating the right things, you know, but to the best of our ability, but like we're not actually doing what we need to do. Yeah. And so hearing you say that, it just reminds me of the reality that I think that's true for a lot of people, man. Like it's no shade on the parents. Nope. It's just like, man, just wasn't modeled very well.
Yeah, for sure. No shade. But how do we do better as the church even? I think how do we do better as the church to equip and to get families there? You know? So
Amen.
I think about the parts of the previous question and like the habits and rhythms that parents can set and how we can make sure that that is part of our weekly rhythms as families, or even daily, you know, doing family devotions or whatever that looks like for your family, making sure that it stays and it sticks and it's not just a season, but it sticks for, 18 years, 18 years of your kid's upbringing, you know,
good, man. So, and I think developing that strategy is really important. And you're right, man, as a church, how can we help? Because I don't think there's a bagged answer here.
No.
Every family rhythm is a little bit different. And so what is that? What works for you, and how do you best care for your family? I had someone say this. He's like, man, I really feel, this is a pastor friend of mine. He's like, I really feel weird saying this. He's like, but my family didn't sit around the supper table every night and like say, okay, church or family, time to, sit down and let's sing a song and let's do family discipleship. He's like, my parents never did that. We didn't just have this structured, we're sitting down, singing and opening the Bible together. He's like, but you know what? He's like, my mom and dad modeled discipleship so well for me. It just looked a little different. It was like, as you go, right? Like when my mom was driving me to practice, she was just pouring into me. When my dad was taking us to school, he was just pouring into us. It was very intentional. He said, now as an adult, I see that. He's like, but sometimes people will say, well, in order for you to really lead your family well, you got to sit at the table every night and do this, this, and this. And there's something really good about gathering around the table. Yep. I think that's a great thing. We do this at our family. In our family, we try to eat meals together and we play Uno and we talk about the day. We have these little flashcards where
that's awesome.
Conversation starters like, hey, what about this? What about that? I think that's good. Yep. But point being, that may not be the thing for everybody. It may be, man, hey, you as a parent, just be really intentional when you have that time with your children and when you have that time together, like be intentional to model what you say.
Yeah.
And it's good.
Yeah. I'm going to brag on my wife real quick if I can.
Yeah,
but
please.
Social media. I mean, the amount of time that people spend on social media is consuming their life.
Sure.
And if you're on there, that's fine. Like you do you, but also know that if you're a parent or even married, or your friendships could be distracted, or the time that you could be pouring into those relationships could be distracted from social media. She hopped off of social media, and I'm grateful for that. Yeah. Her last post was, I'm going to invest in these faces, and they're the 5 faces that she sees every day. So that's cool. I'm excited for that, but yeah, I think that's just a big thing.
I love that, man. And I was actually, this week is about, when Potiphar's wife tempted Joseph and how do we flee temptation, that kind of thing. And I was reading about that, and one of the things that said in there is like one of the things we have to be careful of is this replacement when it comes to sin, right? Because man, I know Lauren, and she's amazing. And I know she made that decision because she's like, hey, I want to honor King Jesus in this. I think where the issue is for us is it's not, and you said this well, it's not that social media is a thing.
Yeah.
The thing could be anything. Yeah. And if you get off social media and you do something else that replaces that, it's equally taking away.
Correct.
Right. So it's like, okay, is Christ our greatest treasure, and are we pursuing him above everything else? Because if that is true, then now we're able to really see, oh man, yeah, this is detracting from what I need to be doing, which is the conclusion that she came to, right? It's like, man, I want us to honor Jesus in this. And so I think for us, it's important to hear that it could be anything. And if we're just replacing one for the other, like we're not doing any good.
No good.
We have to just say, man, the reason we're doing this is because we have this window of time, especially with your kids, right? Like you said, you're going to have Piper, your dog.
Oh, yes.
Longer than them as far as in the house goes. Prayerfully, right? Hopefully when they're 18.
Yeah,
anyway,
for sure.
But yeah, you've got this window of time with your kids, man. So like, what are you doing with it? How are you honoring Jesus with it and really pouring into to them? And I think you said this well a few minutes ago as well. Developing that strategy for growth is important.
Yep.
Like if you don't have a plan,
you're just running.
You're just like you're throwing Jello at the wall. Like some may stick from time to time. That's great. But let's be more intentional. Let's throw the darts at the wall, right?
That's good.
Yeah. All right, what else you got?
Oh, man. So we're reminded by the story of Joseph that God can redeem our failures. And maybe it's not specific here, but to you, but you could answer this if you want, if you have any failures in life. But what areas of your life have you seen God redeem?
Wow, what a good question. Yeah, and we do see this in Joseph, right? Like Joseph, obviously we talked a little bit about the family dynamic with his daddy Jacob and some of the failures that Jacob had and you know, God even redeemed that. And then you have Joseph who has all these ups and downs, right? It's like the Lord's with him and he gains favor and then all of a sudden something happens, whether it's something that you caused or whether it's circumstantial, but something that kind of set you back. I mean, Joseph experienced those things. And we see ultimately victory there. I don't know that our situation always turns out the way that we want it to turn out, but I can give you testimony after testimony of how the Lord has been so kind in redeeming my failures. Man, this is not like empty preacher rhetoric. I fail all the time as a pastor, like literally all the time. And it grieves me. Like there's times I go home, I'm like, man, I really should have handled that better. I should have done this better, whether it's something in the office or whether it's something with our people. I really feel the weight of that. And God's just so kind at reminding me, yeah, it's true, but I'm not finished, right? Like I'm not finished. And you learn from it. It's sanctifying work. Like the Lord uses, God uses this to sharpen you and to make you better. So those are like the day-to-day things. I think about what I would call the kind of the bigger stones in my life. Like I can look back and say, man, there's a pretty big failure there. Not that one is worse than the other, but you have those markers, right? You're just like, man, how do I get past that? And I've just seen the Lord's kindness in that, where you feel like can't see around this rock. I can't see a way. Like I've really just messed up. I can't see a way past this. And, you know, God in his kindness again has allowed us to see, you know what, it's not final. Like I'm not finished. And matter of fact, I'm going to use this somehow for your good and to my glory. And I could give a lot of specific examples here. I don't know that I have time to do that. I would just say, I think my wife and I both have just been recipients of this, and it's something that we gather often, and we just say, man, hasn't the Lord been good? You know, and it's not that things have turned out the way that like we had hoped that they would, you know, like I don't know that things go, the promise is not there that things just go the way that we think they should go. But you look back and say, now maybe this was even better. Right. And that's how the Lord works. It's like, man, I prayed for this, but God carried me this way and he's allowed me to experience freedom from this and like all the things. And it's better than you expected, right? Yeah. So at the end of the day, you trust the providence of God. You trust that he is sovereign and in control. And you trust that failure is not final and that the Lord can work in and through it. So I just want to encourage anybody that's listening, if you got some junk, man, that you're just wrestling through, you're wading through, what the word teaches is to confess that to God. 1 John 1:9, you know, if we confess, he's faithful and just to forgive us of our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. But there's also this opportunity to confess to your brother or sister in Christ. James talks about that being healing for your soul. And as you do that, man, that freedom that you can walk in, you realize that we have Jesus, who's our great high priest. Like he's interceding for us. And so that sin always causes you to look in. But that freedom in him, man, in Jesus causes us to look up, and we're able to say, you know what, I don't have to live in this space of just like, okay, no more for me. Like there's no hope for me. I continue to do X. No, man, like you can be you can be free, and the Lord can set you free, and you can find that hope that's rooted in Jesus.
Yeah, that's really good. You hit it right there. I was thinking through like Hebrews 4:5 when I think about like past mistakes or the stuff that just happens in life, and you're like, there's no way God can forgive me. There's no way to climb out of this, and there's no redemption here. Like that's not even a word I would use for some of the things that happen in my life. You know, if that's somebody listening, or even in my life, I've been there. Like I've been in that situation where like, really, God will really save me, and I'm in that pit. Right. And I think there's no one who gets this, but Jesus sympathizes with us. He gets us. Like he is the great high priest who has been there. Like he feels that stuff. And I think there's just this unbelievable feeling of when we give it to him, that grace and that mercy that he shows to us, we are free. Yeah. We are free in that. And that should be good. That is good. I know it's tough to deal with the junk. Yeah. It's tough to deal with the stuff and the apologies that come with it, or the like everything that may still like get stirred up when something triggers a memory or something that you've done. But man, just know that Jesus is good. Yeah. And he gets it. Yeah. And he's there for you.
It's awesome, man.
Huge.
Yeah. It's good.
All right, we got one more question.
Let's go.
You ready?
Yeah, let's do
it. In what ways is your walk not matching your talk?
You asked this for you. This is your question.
As a parent, as a follower of Jesus, you know, I'll answer it if you want me to.
Yeah, I was joking, but go for it.
All right. So I think we mentioned like the habits and stuff of like spiritual disciplines. We're teaching our kids at midweek on Wednesday nights, like spiritual disciplines. Yeah. We're in the season of rest right now, trying to teach kindergartners, first graders how to rest. Oh, wow. It's quite interesting, right? So last night I challenged a bunch of the kindergarten and first graders, like, hey, go home each day this week and tell your parents I need 5 minutes of rest. And one little girl, she raised her hand and she said, well, I get 3 hours of that every day. And I was like, oh man, I definitely feel that. Your parents are awesome for like giving you quiet time. Like that's awesome. But I'm talking about like, where's your 5 minutes with Jesus? Whether you can read or not, are you resting? That's are you just being silent? Are you like Elijah in the cave? Like God could have spoke to him through the earthquake. He could have spoke to him through the wind, the fire, but he chose to whisper. He chose to whisper, and we need a little silence in our life. I'm not doing that. I'm teaching it, I'm preaching it, but I have found little time, little season of rest right now. So I need to just like think about, man, I'm preaching it, but I need to practice this too. Yeah. So,
and it's funny, Jared, how the Lord can use some of those messages to, like I say this often, I'm preaching to me first, right? It's like, man, you're preaching this, but it's also like a message for you to say, oh, be reminded that failure's not final. Be reminded that God's not finished. Be reminded that no matter what you walk through, like the Lord's with you, like, you know, whatever it is, the Lord can use those things. And I think for me, similar to that, I wrote my dissertation when I was finishing my degree at New Orleans.
It's a big word, man.
It's a big word, man. I'm not sure what it means, but it was on, similar to what you're talking about, it was on pastoral burnout. And the reason I did that is I was leading a group of pastors who were just struggling with life, man. And by life, I mean life and ministry, which bled into everything else. So some of the statistics would say things like this, like whatever percent it is, very high percentage of spouses would say the worst thing that happened to our family was my husband going into ministry. Another like large set of percentages, or a large percentage would go to, hey, within 5 years, you know, and again, this is in I don't want to give a false percentage, but upper 80s, low 90s% of people that graduated seminary, which is a big degree. It's like at the time it's like 90-hour degree. They were out of the ministry completely, right? And so you continue to bracket those stats and percentages, and very similar, like moral failures and just flat out like angry at God, and just like literal nervous breakdowns. Like I just can't do this job anymore. And so it piqued my interest because I was leading this group of pastors, and from the group that I was leading, we had done this like national study, this data study. And I was like, hey, what about you guys? And the same thing started to rise to the surface. It looked a little different, but for all intents and purposes, the same. And I was like, well, listen, guys, this is a real problem. So I wrote this whole thing on it. That was my ministry project that I turned in, all of the things. And so people would ask me, hey, can you come teach on that? Can you come help us? Like, we want to learn about how to be healthy. Because what I did is I identified some ways for us to have that rest, identify ways for us to have the health that we needed. Great. Go do that. I would say for me, man, like, even though I studied that, I realized the dangers of it. I realized the consequences of it. I realized the need for rest. For me, man, I don't walk that, and even I shared a kind of a silly illustration on, Sunday, but true, about River Joyce. And like, it literally the first time that I sat down, cause we're kind of like remodeling our house, lots of work that needs to be done there, all the things. And so I've been so busy with that, so busy with church. And this is the first time I sat down, and she's trying to get my attention, and I'm watching a Gator game, a football game. And she's like, Daddy, look at this picture I've drawn, whatever. I was like, no, not in a second, hang on. We're about to score, which doesn't happen often. And she's like, Daddy, do you love me more or do you love football more? And she was being funny, but it grabbed me. Yeah. And so what a silly questions. Of course, I love you more, River Joy. But it reminded me, like, that rest for me can't look like checking out. Mm-hmm. That rest for me can't look like peeling back from the things that matter to me. Like, if I'm going to be intentional, all the things that we've talked about earlier, I have to realize that I need to be healthy to where my best energies are given to the things that matter the most. Yeah. And it's not making sure the bathroom's remodeled and ready, as important as that is. And I feel the pressure. Like, I've promised my wife, we're going to get this done. It's, man, am I saving my best energy for my spouse and for my kids and to disciple them well? Getting back to where my walk and talk, like, I think that's something I'm still struggling with. I'm still struggling. Like, you got the pastoral things, you got life things, and burnout is like right around the corner if you're not careful. Mm-hmm. By God's grace, I'm realizing that, and I'm talking through it and, doing the things that we need to do. But yeah, man, I think you scratched on something that's a real thing for me as well.
Yeah. I think it's real too in the, like, yes, pastorally, the church setting. I found it even in corporate world when I was in the corporate world.
Oh, like, for sure.
My phone was blowing up nonstop. I mean, I had a district full of people that needed me all the way till about 11 p.m. And my phone was always going off. And so I know the challenge of saying no. Yeah. I know the challenge of putting the phone down. I know the challenge of, like, finding that peace and that rest so that I can invest in the things that are going to be there way longer. Because I know firsthand, like, that job is no more, right? Yeah. So all that time and effort, like, man, it was for good. Sure. But here we are.
No, that's good. And Jared, I realize that probably the lion's share of people that will be listening to this are not pastors, right? But they are exactly there. Yeah. That whatever their job is, whatever it is, it's so easy for that to just engulf you. Yeah. And it's true for us too as pastors.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
For sure. So whoever's listening to this, I just want to encourage you guys, like, learn from the story that we talked through Sunday in Genesis 37 and a little bit of, the history of Jacob's family. Because I think one of the things that we could extract from that is man, it's really important for us to have those healthy rhythms to where our walk does match our talk. And so you can say that you're present as a dad, you can say you're present as a mom, you can say you're present as a, father, husband, wife. You can say you're present in those things, but if what you're saying is not matching what you're doing, like, there's only trouble around the corner from that. So it's good, man. All right, is that all the questions?
That's it, man.
Jared,
that's all we got, man.
Bro, thank you for being here today. This was fun.
Thanks for this, dude.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
Hey, happy Pastor Appreciation Month.
Oh, thank you, bro.
Isn't that cool?
I appreciate that.
Whole month.
Yeah, same to you, man. Happy Pastor Appreciation.
It's cool. Thanks for having me.
That, man. Hey, thank you guys for listening. I hope this has been fruitful, and I hope you have an amazing week. God bless.